Robert, we'll see that when we start tracking the project. Okay, so hang on to your question. We'll get there when we get to project tracking. I'll show you once we start running the project, opening this restaurant. You'll see what happens after a task is complete and how we tag it. It's done. There's this whole thing around putting in actuals. So planned dates is one thing, but then what actually happened, I recognize is another thing. So you can have two separate set of dates. Helen, yeah, the interface is different. A lot of the fundamentals are the same. Yeah, how it looks is totally different. Do I have a book available for 2010? Are you talking about Project 2010, Linda? No, I just haven't had enough time. But in lieu of a book, I'd be more than happy to do a lot of these webcasts. So I'll certainly work with O'Reilly to, if there's a specific topic you guys are interested in around project management, Microsoft Project, SharePoint, or even Project Server, I'd be more than happy to do a presentation on it, since that's the kind of work I do day in, day out. So. Lorette, yes, we're going to do that. That's a great new thing with Project 2010, SharePoint 2010. It's out-of-the-box synchronization of the Gantt chart, which really is quite interesting. I'll show that. Will I be covering resource leveling? Yes, to a certain extent. Okay, guys, let's get back at it. So we stopped at talking about linking tasks, so that's cool. We're still in planning here. Let's move on. Before I jump on to the next step, I want to talk about calendars. This is one of those things that's very powerful, yet people don't take advantage of it, or they don't know it's there, or they just don't understand it. So let me talk about this first and show you an example in a while and explain why you got to configure this or tweak this right so you can get as accurate a schedule as you can. So listen up. Microsoft Project comes with what's called base calendars. In fact, it's these calendars that figure out when certain things should happen. Out of the box, you have 3 base calendars. You have what's called a standard base calendar, night shift base calendar, and the 24-hour base calendar. These calendars define working time. Again, listen, base calendars define working time. And what I mean by working time is, for example, the standard base calendar defines that Monday to Friday between 8 to 5, with the lunch break 12 to 1. So 8 to 12, 1 to 5, that's working time. Anything outside of that condition is non-working time. So weekends are off, before 8 in the morning and after 5 in the afternoon, that's non-working time. Night shift is the opposite. Night shift, I think it starts at 10 in the evening and it goes through the next day in 8 hours with an hour break. 24 hours is 24 hours, it's literally 24/7. It's working time. And then you can create your own calendar as well, custom calendar. And in fact, I could do a whole webcast just on calendars. But here's the important point. Every time you create a project in Microsoft Project or a project plan, that's, by the way, what it's called, a Microsoft Project Plan. Notice that there's a file extension, MPP. Every time you create a project plan, it requires that you identify which base calendar you want to use for your project calendar. Again, every project has to have a project calendar, but you tell it which base calendar to use. If you don't tell it, by default, it's going to use the standard base calendar as your project calendar. But you can certainly change that. I'll show that to you in a while. Next, the second type of calendar that's required in every project is what's known as your resource calendar. Resource calendar is created for every resource you put in, every person. And the reason why that happens is so that for the resource themselves, what you can do is you can define people's vacations, sick days, and whatnot, which I'll do that as well. And then the last piece is the task calendar, and I put it optional. You don't have to have it because by default your task would be scheduled around the project calendar, but there might be a situation where there's a specific task that needs to have its own calendar. So let me give you a good example. Let's say there's a project up in Boston. I know somebody's from Boston up here. There's a project up in Boston for doing construction, roadwork construction for the next 2 years. So there's a task there that's called pave highway. Well, we know how winter comes early up in Massachusetts. So there's a certain time of the year you can't pave the highway. You cannot. So what I could do is I create a calendar, assign it to that task called paving highway, and say, look, for this calendar, non-working time is between October to March. So if you assign it to the task called pave highway, you can only pave highway between March and September or something, okay? But that's optional. You don't have to have it. Whereas project calendar, resource calendar, you have to have it. All right. So with that, let me show you my screen again because I want to show you calendars quickly here, and then after that we'll go to the next step. Okay. All right. So in Project 2010 right now, realize that I have not defined my calendar. So if I look at the project calendar, like I said, if I did not define which calendar to use, which base calendar to use for the project, if I look at my project information, notice that it says here, it's using the standard base calendar for my project. And notice there's 2 other out-of-the-box calendars, and I can create my own as well. So let's say I leave it at standard, and let's say I want to put in holidays, because one of the things that's not here is holidays. And if you want to be accurate with your schedule, you got to put in your holidays. So the way I can do that is I can go to what's called the backstage. Okay, there's a couple ways for me to do it. So I can bring up project options, and this relates to the calendar. And first of all, I can define things like, so I click on schedule. I can define things like my daily schedule, 8 to 5, 8 hours, hours per week, right? So all that setting. So that's one. And another thing I could do is I can go to where that? One second. I get confused with the old version because I'm using 2 versions right now. So if I click on project, notice there's a selection here called change working time. If I click on that, notice it tells me that I'm using the standard base calendar for my project, and the way it's defined, if I click on the work weeks tab, I'm just going to show you Sunday, non-working time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 8 to 12, 1 to 5. So, it's your standard settings. So what I'm going to do, I'll just fast forward and do a couple of things here. So for example, for some reason, I'm going to put like, I'm going to call it a company holiday. Company holiday. Okay? And I will start on January 10 to January 12, 2011. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm redefining the standard base calendar. I'm putting in some holiday. I'm saying that, look, January 10 to January 12 of next year, we're not going to work. Now, when I hit OK, check out what's going to happen to my schedule. For now, it's figured out I'm going to work, this restaurant will open on July 25. But notice when I hit OK, look at that. Now it's July 28. Makes sense, right? Because I've got holidays. I added 3 days for holidays, 10, 11, 12. And again, that's the power of Microsoft Project. You could do a lot of what-if analysis. You stick in all the holidays and whatnot, okay? So that's one aspect of calendars is you assign a project calendar from a base calendar to your project. Okay, so next, I want to talk about the next step here. And the next step, and again, if you guys notice, it's already 2:20, and I'm still talking about planning, right? So what does that mean? Number 5, as a part of planning, we can now assign resources and the cost. So one of the first things we have to do is we have to define who or what our resources are. And after we define that, we can assign resources. Very good. Planning is critical, right? Hey, before I continue on, I remember talking to a customer, and we were going to do a SharePoint deployment for them. And I said, well, we're going to spend this time planning. He goes, Ducks, planning is for sissies. Real men, we just do it. Right. Okay. Going back. So next step is to assign resource. And after we assign resource, this is where I'll also talk about resource allocation and leveling. And it's straightforward to do in Microsoft Project 2010. And after we assign our resource, I'll do this at the same time, one of the things we'll start looking at and seeing in a while is if you assign multiple resources, this dialog box is very important, because if it behaves differently, you can certainly switch as to, you assign more people. Did you want the duration to change or work to change? So we'll see that as well, okay? And then this is a screen, or this is a table where we can put in cost information. If we have some kind of fixed costs or overhead costs, we could do that. And as the last step of planning, we baseline the project plan. And the process of baselining is essentially taking a picture of what our plan looks like. So once we start running the project, there's something we can compare against. Okay? So once that's done, that's the end of planning. And then we're going to talk about tracking. Okay. So let me go back to my Microsoft project, my copy of Microsoft project, and I'm going to show you the last 3 steps, and then we'll talk about tracking. Okay. So here's where we're at, friends. So I've got the links, the dependencies defined, the calendars defined. So let me start working with resources. So I'm going to click on the resource tab and click on the view and pick the resource sheet view, resource sheet. Okay. So in the resource sheet view, I'm going to start putting in my resources. So let's say one of my resources name is Jerry, and then Elaine, and then Cosmo, and then George. Okay. And then I'm going to put Yev. Okay. If you guys kind of figure out who these people are, I'm sure you won't figure out who Yev is. Yev is the soup Nazi. Okay. So after I put in all these resource names, I can actually put material resources as well. So let's say for some reason I needed paint, I can pick material resource. Okay. So quickly going through these columns. So I've got resources. By default, it defaults to work type, meaning these resources will perform work. I can put labels for my material resource. So let's say the way I measure paint is based on gallons. And then this defines how much of that resource will I be using for the project. If it says 100%, that means I'm going to use the resource 100% of their available time. By default, all the resources are available for 8 hours. Now, if this is not true, you can certainly change it. So I can say Elaine is only available half time for me because she's working on something else. I can put in rates. Jerry, maybe $50 an hour. Overtime rate, $75. So you can put in all these numbers. In fact, I'm going to do it for all the resources. Notice this is a cool little drag down tool, very similar to Excel. You can pretty much copy the value from a cell above it. Cost per use, for paint, maybe it's $10 a gallon. Okay. Now, accrual, that's how it's going to calculate cost. Prorated means if Jerry worked 2 hours, it's $200. Whereas this other thing, if you accrue at start, what it's going to do is kind of like prepaid. So if you assign Jerry to I don't know, a 10-day task, and accrual is start, so the cost will come up to whatever that whole 10 days is, like prepaid. And then the other accrual is where if you pick end, accrue at end, what you're going to do is once you start running the project, you won't see any costs go up. The number will be calculated only until you're done. And last but not the least, check this out, base calendar. Remember the discussion I had about calendars? I said the second calendar that Microsoft Project requires is resource calendar. And a resource calendar is always based off some existing calendar. In this case, since I didn't pick any, it's going to be based off the standard base calendar. But what I could do is, for example, I can go to Jerry, and I can go to the resource information and change Jerry's calendar. See that? It says resource calendar for Jerry. I can say, you know what? Jerry, for next year, from January 3, he's going to take his vacation. Okay? This is very important. I have to define all this for my schedule to show up right. He's going to take his vacation until January 28th. Let me take this. All right. So I just did that. And the beauty is I tweaked Jerry's calendar, and I didn't touch anybody else's. This is Jerry's calendar. Okay. And then I can put people's sick days and availability and all that good stuff. So I can go through each resource. Cool. So after I've done that, let's say these are all my resources, I'm ready to start assigning tasks. Okay. So how do I do that? How do I assign tasks? I go back to my Gantt chart, And like anything else, there's 10,000 ways to do the same thing. My favorite tool to assign resources is this assign resource icon. If you click on it, you'll see this assign resources dialog box show up. And this dialog box will always stay active even if I click on something else. So let's get started here. So the first task is to create a business plan. Just to refresh everybody's memory, we said creating a business plan is a fixed work task. It's 40 hours. So duration would just be calculated depending on who the resource, how many resources we have. So if I put in Elaine, remember, everybody listen, what did we say about Elaine? Elaine is only available half time. So if Elaine needs to work 40 hours at half time, how long will duration be? This is like Jeopardy. What do you guys think? Elaine is available half time, meaning she only works 4 hours a day. Very good. So let's see. So I'm going to hit assign. Ah, there you go. So 2 weeks or 10 business days. That's right. Now, here is the problem. Again, a lot of people just rely on the duration column and they stick everything in. If earlier, if I only put 1 week there and I assign Elaine, what do you think will happen? They'll stay at 1 week or 5 days and work will just be 20 hours. So it's very important that people understand what they're estimating for in the resources availability. Yeah? Next. And by the way, whenever you see this question mark, that means it's not finalized yet because it's just assuming Elaine will work half time all the time. But what if Elaine's working on other stuff? She can potentially do this in 3 weeks, right? Because she's juggling other stuff. But if it's indeed 10 days, if that's all she's doing, so I can click, hit 10 and just make it permanent, okay? Ooh, what did I do here? Undo, okay? So next. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to assign secure funding. I'm going to assign someone else. This time I'm going to assign Jerry. Now let's refresh our memory on Jerry. What did we say about Jerry during January? Jerry will be taking off all of January. So when I hit assign, what's going to happen? If I hit assign, I'm going to assign Jerry to a task that's scheduled on January 20th. Delayed start? Absolutely. So when I click on that, check this out, friends. I assign Jerry to secure funding. Suddenly, this task is now rescheduled to January 31st. Oh, wait a second, ducks. Let's look at that. So, that's a problem, ducks. I can't show this to my boss. If my boss sees this, what are you doing here? You're slacking. Well, no. Here's the situation. That's why it's important for you to understand what's the priority of the project. You can present this to your boss. You can say, well, boss, look, since you didn't get, the only person who can do secure funding is Jerry. He's going to take his vacation. And since I'm going to assign him to secure funding, ergo, it's going to delay the project. And you told me I can't spend more than $10. No, that can't be because schedule is valuable. Well, if schedule is important, this thing can't be delayed. We got either you got to give me more money to hire somebody else, or you got to convince Jerry not to take that vacation. And this is a great tool for you to justify, right? But again, I see a lot of times people aimlessly clicking, coming up with a nice chart and not even questioning these things, and they don't even know why they're doing this, right? You have to be clear what's the priority of the project. Now, this might be okay because if it's an internal project, you don't have any budget to hire people, a month delay, no big deal, then that's cool. It's all good, right? But you have to go back to the basics, what defines project success. So this tool just helps you figure it out, okay? Next. Secure funding, that's all good. And let me show you a couple more examples, and then I'll wrap this up so we can look at tracking. So secure location, I'm going to assign George to it. So 5 days, 5 business days, 1 week, 40 hours if George is working full time. So another example I want to show you is check this out. Let's say you look at this and you go, you know what? George can't handle this. I mean, this job of securing locations too much for George. It's still going to take 1 week, but 2 people has to work on it. So I'm going to assign Cosmo because he works really well with Cosmo. So if I hit assign, what do you guys think will happen? If I assign 2 full-time people working on this task, what will change? Duration or work? Well, let's see. If I hit assign, by default, listen, by default, check out what happens. Because I've already assigned a resource to it, and because, what was my original assumption? I said this task is a fixed duration task, work increased, right? Because this task is the kind of task where if you throw more people at it, it's still going to be 1 week. Now, listen, if this is not the case, you look at this, you go, well, no, hold on a second, ducks. That's not what I want. What I really want is the duration to decrease because I threw more people there. Work is still the same. So what you can do is you click on the task name. I'm still highlighting. I don't know if you guys can see it on your screen, but look at the task name secure locations. There's a little arrow on the upper left. You can click on that, and this drop-down message would show up. It says, look, you've added new resources. Is it because you wanted to reduce duration or increase total work? Now, it did increase total work because the original assumption is the task is a fixed duration task. That's why you throw more people. It's like training. More people go to training, it's still the same time period. It's just work effort will increase. But if your intent is the other, so I'm going to go back to Dave's point. Okay, no, that's not the intent, Ducks. The intent is I'm throwing more people because I want them to get it done sooner, in this case half a week, then good. That's fine. So my point is you have to be clear of what you want to do, and then there's menus that will show up that can help you, all right? So, and then last but not the least, let me finish all this up. Let me assign all this other task to, let's see, Yev. Yeah, Yev Kazim. He can handle all that. All right. He's a soup Nazi. Okay. So, if I assign all these other tasks to Yev, which is fine, he can handle it, but notice this little red indicator came up. What that means is, look, this task has resources assigned which are overallocated. It means you've given Yev more work than he can handle. Why is that? Because, just to refresh our memory, a lot of the ladder tasks, look at this, a lot of the ladder tasks are in parallel. Absolutely. Kelly's question, can you assign multiple people to one task? Absolutely. For example, this secure location, I've got George, Cosmo, you can assign as many people as you want. Okay? But with this last example, I've assigned Yev to the last set of tasks. Look at that. They're all, if I go back to my resource view, there's a view called resource usage. And notice that Yev is red. What that means is Yev is assigned more work than he can handle. Okay? So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is through a view called resource graph. And I really like this view because I can step through, give me a second here. Oop, there's Yev. And let's go to next. When is he? There you go. Here's the problem, my friends. Look at Yev in the resource graph view. He's 300% allocated, meaning on these days he's working 24-hour days. What's wrong with that, Ducks? Isn't that how it works? No. It shouldn't work this way, but here's the problem. You don't want to plan over allocation because we all know you're on a project, you would need to spend overtime if stuff doesn't work out right. So if you've already over-allocated somebody, they're already working overtime in the plan, they can't work overtime on top of overtime, right? So ideally, again, I'm talking about ideally, there's situations where you just can't do anything about it. What you can do is you can address this using a capability called leveling. What leveling means is you're still going to use the same set of resources, but you're going to have Microsoft Project help you level the schedule so that the resource will not be overallocated. In short, you're going to have Microsoft Project help you figure out how to reschedule all this stuff so, yeah, it won't be overallocated. So I'm just going to show you a quick example here. Under the Resource tab, there is a selection called Level Resource. So I can pick, hey, please level Yev. So if I click Level now what it did is it rescheduled everything so that Yev won't be working 24-hour days. But what's the impact? Wow. The impact is the project would be 2-3 months later than what was first planned. And again, I know management would just go up in arms, that can't be, whatever. You go back, what's the priority? Is the priority the time? Or is the priority we can only spend $10, right? If you give me more people, I can have other people work on the other tasks and not over-allocate yet. So it's a game of prioritizing time versus scope versus budget, okay? So let's say it is what it is. I don't want Yev to be over-allocated. I'll take Microsoft Project's recommendations. And certainly if you don't want its recommendations, that's perfectly fine as well. I'm going to hit save, okay? So once that's done, I'm going to take the last step of planning. The last step of planning is saving a baseline. Now, what saving a baseline is, it's literally saving a primary reference point so that when I start running the project, there's metrics I can compare against. So all I have to do is click on the project tab, click set baseline, okay? And notice that I have this dialog box. You can set up to 11 baselines. If you're wondering why, imagine if you run a long-term project, and if you're like me, customers change their mind. 3 months down the road, if a change request comes in, the schedule has changed, I can take another picture, another baseline, so I can keep on doing that. So once the project is done, if you get questioned, how come it took this much longer or this much more money, I can bring back all the other baseline information and say, well, 3 months into it, we added 5 things. Or 5 months into it, we changed this resource. So you can save as many baselines as you want. So I'm going to hit save. I selected set baseline. I'm going to click OK. And once I do that, the baseline is saved. Now, one of the things I want to show you when I'm going to click on project information. And in the project information dialog box, there's a button called statistics. In statistics, very, very nice set of information. Yes, Bill, I'll answer your question in a while. I'm going to show you in a while. So notice the statistical information at a high level. This is the baseline, which will never change. That's our plan. The current, that's what the schedule looks like. And actual is nothing yet because we haven't started tracking. And again, information for duration, working cost as well. Okay? So now that I've set the baseline, we're ready. We're ready to rumble. So you're going to love this. Wow, it's already 2:37. We're already an hour and a half in. This is good stuff, but I'll make sure we get it done right on time. So now after you do your planning, hopefully that was helpful for everybody. Just a process, a step-by-step process, how to use Microsoft Project. Now we start tracking. So one of the key questions before you even start tracking is figure out what are you tracking. Most of us, we're tracking time, schedule. But some of us are tracking budget, and some of us might be tracking change as well. So you have to be clear what you're tracking. Project tracking entails 3 iterative things. We monitor, pretty much we watch what's going on. And in my world, for example, I tell all my project team members, look, every Tuesday and Thursday, you need to update me with what you've done. And when I mean update, they don't come up to me and say, yeah, Docs, I've spent 80%, or I got 80%, because that doesn't mean anything to me. And I know a lot of you are smirking right now or laughing, because if you ask a resource, how much have you done? 43%. You ask the same question 5 weeks later, how much have you done? 59%, right? It doesn't mean anything. When I track actual, how much have you spent, how much time have you spent when you started, and how much more time you need, because that's measurable. So project tracking entails these 3 things. You monitor, you get the information, you analyze. So based on what you've got, you have to look at how will it affect the rest of the project. And then you correct. If you need to add more people, remove some tasks, you have to do it, right, to meet whatever the criteria or the success criteria of the project is. So what tools do you use? There's a lot of tracking tools, but I'm going to show you a couple of tools that I use. I use the Update Task dialog box with Microsoft Project 2010 and the tracking table. And in addition, I'm going to go through some of these slides, and I'll show you all the demos at the same time. I use SharePoint 2010, and this is really, really exciting. With Microsoft Project, especially for those who've used the prior version, it's a great scheduling tool, but really it's not a tool that can help us collaborate. Because traditionally, if you just have Microsoft Project by itself, the way tracking works is your resource would email you or will call you, and then you put in the updates yourself. But with 2010, what you could do is you can publish the schedule on the SharePoint 2010 site and have the resource update their time there, and I'll show that to you in a while, okay? So it's great. It's a great collaborative platform. And by the way, I have a full screencast. If you're interested, I'll show you how you set this up step by step. This is an hour presentation I did, but I show a lot of demos too. But later, I'll just show you a quick example because we don't have time to go through all the details, okay? So, so after you you can certainly use Microsoft SharePoint 2010 for collaboration with Project 2010. And then the next piece is after you gather the information, you can start tracking or you can start analyzing what's happening. So if you look at those tools I show you, first I've got the tracking Gantt. The tracking Gantt visually shows me where I am compared to what the plan was. So if you see two sets of bars on the picture, the bottom bar is the plan, the top bar is the actual, okay? Then the next is also the variance table. Somebody was asking earlier with Ducks, can you compare baselines? Absolutely. You can bring up the variance table and you can see all the numbers and compare it side by side, okay? And then the last step of tracking is really correcting the project. Now that you've gathered the data, you've analyzed what's going on, what's the impact, then you have to recheck what the priority is. Okay, based on what's going on, looks like we're going to be behind and schedule is important. So that means maybe I should add more people, or maybe I should remove certain tasks, or maybe I should chop up this project to do a second project. All right? So that's one of the things that you have to think about and talk to your customers about too. So you always revisit this. Now, another aspect that happens a lot, and I'll show this to you too, is in the middle of a project, suddenly a new project came up, but it's related to this project. So one of the nice things with Project 2010 as well, and you could do this in the prior version, is you can you have a master project and sub-projects, and with a single view, you can have a bunch of projects using the same set of resources, so you can look at how it works with shared resources. Okay? All right. So with that, what I'm going to do, I'll show you a bunch of demos. Okay? And let me switch my screen again here. So I'm going to start talking about tracking and the idea of monitoring, analyzing, and controlling. All right. So here's where we're at. Okay. So let's say the project got started, and I'll talk about Project Server as well. There's a lot of questions with Project Server. I'll talk about that once we're done here, but certainly I'll address that question. Okay. So let me zoom out. Give me a second here. Okay. Let me zoom out. And so let's say the project got started. So what are some of the tools that I use? So I bring up, well, a couple of things. I bring up a view called the Tracking Gantt view. So I go to View, Tracking Gantt, and what I could do is I go to the actual timeline, okay? So notice there's two sets of data, the actual and the baseline. So I start running the project. So I got started. I'm going to go to the Task tab. So really the Start task, nobody's doing it. It just starts. So I'm going to click 100%. That means it's done. We got started. So I'm going to select the next task called Create Business Plan. So Create Business Plan was assigned to Elaine. And instead of clicking these %, which I do not do when I have a task assigned to people, because these % doesn't talk about % work complete. It talks about the % of duration complete. So which is not relevant to a lot of the things we're doing. So what I'm going to do is under the Task tab, there's a thing called Mark on Track. I'm going to click on that and select Update Task. And this, my friend, is something you would want to use all the time. So I'm going to ask Elaine, hey, Elaine, so you were scheduled to start this on January 3rd. When did you start? You know, and Elaine, and she took a couple of days off for the holidays, New Year holidays. So she said, you know what, Dux, I actually started on January 5th, okay? January 5th. So she started on January 5th, and I'm going to ask her, okay, this task was supposed to be a 10-day task. How much time have you spent? Well, I'm already in day 6. So I'm going to put 6 days, actual duration. How much more time do you need, Elaine? Remaining duration. I'm not done yet, Doc, so I need 7 more days. Sorry, I've underestimated this task. So So what I'm showing you here is not relying on percent, because to me that's not as measurable. What's measurable is ask when they actually started, how much time they've spent if they're not done, and how much more time do they need. And notice these boxes are grayed out because that's your baseline, okay? So since she started late and she'll need more time, notice when I hit OK, what's going to happen? As you suspected, okay, this task slipped, all right? So notice that the task slipped, but the whole project hasn't slipped. In case you forgot, just to refresh everybody's memory, the project has not slipped because Jerry can't start the next task until the 31st anyway. He's on vacation, remember? So we're still cool. We're still good with that. Now, after Elaine, I go back to Elaine again and ask her, hey, Elaine, are you done with your task? Let's say it's a couple of days. Yeah, so when did you get it done? Oh, I got it done on the 26th on the new schedule because I was late. Okay, so I talk to Elaine and I update my task. I go to January 26th, and when I hit OK, boom, notice that it says 100% done. This is checked. I'm moving on to the next task. Now, Jerry got started. Same idea. I'm going to highlight this task called Secure Funding. I'm going to click on this Mark on Track Update task. So I asked Jerry, so Jerry, this is a 3-month task. How long did it take you? Well, I got started on time, but all in all, it took me 4 months. It took me 4 months, okay? So, Sharon, you could do this in 2007. It's the exact same thing. There's an update task dialog box. So it took me 4 months. So I'm like, all right, it is what it is. So actual duration is 4 months. Remaining duration is 0. By the way, for those asking about 2007, last year, August, I did a similar presentation in 2007 here at O'Reilly. I think it's 8 steps for Microsoft Project 2007 success. So it's very similar. You can certainly watch it. So Jerry took 4 months, a month longer. So now when I click OK, the project is now a month behind. And here is the interesting part. So now I can start doing my analysis. Notice that I see this whole project behind from the tracking Gantt. That's a visual look at it. I can look at it different ways. So I can click on the project tab and select project information. I can look at the statistics. So in a global view, it tells me a lot. It says, look, you actually started on time, but the way things are going, looks like you'll end on November 23 if it goes exactly accordingly from this point. The baseline schedule, we scheduled this to be 210 days and 1,600 hours. But since you're delayed and behind and more people doing stuff, you've already spent 95 days, 692 hours. And again, we forecast that this is how much more time, this is the total time, this is the total work you'll have, and the cost information as well. Okay. So that you can look at it at a global view for the project by going to project statistics, or another way is I can go to view tables, and there's a tracking table. Tracking table shows me all the actuals, so I can put in all the data here. When did we actually start? What's the actual duration? And then somebody was asking, well, Doug, can you compare baselines? Absolutely. I can go to table, variance. In the variance view, it shows me the current schedule. The baseline, it even shows me the variance. Wow, this is the variance between the baseline and the actual. And if you have more baseline data, you can insert a column for that specific baseline. So baseline 1, for example, baseline 2, etc. If you took a lot of different snapshots. So you can certainly insert that. And then visually, you can certainly show multiple baselines by changing a view. There's actually a view called a detail. Where's that? Multiple baseline scan. Since I only have a single baseline, I can't show multiple baselines. Okay, so I mean, imagine this: if you're a project manager today, and all you're relying on is emails and Excel files, but you don't have a tool like this, how powerful could this be? Right? Very powerful. So, can I rename the baselines, annotate them? Very good point. You can't rename the baseline, but you can put notes. there's a notes field here you can take advantage of. So let's say I've analyzed, I've assessed this, I talked to, I talked to the customer, and the customer goes, this is not good. What I'd like for you to do is a couple of things. I'd like you to figure out if you can crash the project. What crashing means is get it done sooner. I'm like, all right, but I'm introducing risk here. So what I'm going to do is for permits, I'm going to double click this. Oh, no, sorry. I'm going to double click a task. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to wait for permits to end before I do marketing. Let me go ahead and do this thing at the same time. My only risk is if I don't get the permit and I start marketing, I'll be in bad shape. But that's the risk being introduced for crashing the project. So when I click on OK, all right, so it looks like, well, I still didn't save much time. I said I can start permit and start marketing at the same time. Now, what about this other test? In fact, I'm going to do that for everything. I want to, as soon as, 2 days after acquiring the permit, I'm going to start getting equipment. That might help. Oh, wow, that helped actually. See that? So what I did is, because I'm running the project now, I need to correct it. I need to correct it because I don't want it behind. So what I did, I said, look, 2 days into getting the permit, I'm going to start getting the equipment as well. But again, I'm introducing risk. If I don't get approved, I might get the equipment with no restaurant. So that's what I mean by correcting. So you constantly do that, right? So another thing I want to show is with the time we have, I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to show synchronization with SharePoint. So I have a SharePoint site for the project. This site is called the Pecking Ducks Project Site. How's that? See, I'll be fine as long as I make fun of myself. So this is a SharePoint site. This is SharePoint 2010. In fact, you don't have to have the full-blown SharePoint server. You can have SharePoint Foundation. So all our project-related information is here. All the documents, all the calendar and schedule, all that good stuff. But it's still disconnected with Microsoft Project. So what I want to do is I want to publish this to SharePoint so my resource can put in their information, their updates. So I'm going to click File, Microsoft Project, click on Save and Send. This is known as the Backstage. And I'm going to click on Sync with Task List to SharePoint Cafe. This is the project site called PB, validate URL. And once that's done, I'm going to create a new project task list called Project Tasks. Okay? And click Sync. So what's going to happen is Project 2010 will synchronize my schedule, okay, and make it available in SharePoint 2010. So all those messages popped up. I just kept clicking OK. But let's go back here and make sure it's here. So, oops. Oh, yeah. Well, 1 second. It says here, that's one of the limitations. Somebody was asking, what's the difference between SharePoint Server 2010 and Project Server 2010? The capability is much better than the prior version of SharePoint. However, it's quite limited. So one of the limitations, for example, you can't do a start-to-start dependency. Everything has to be finished to start, right? So everything has to be finished to start. So let me redo my scheduling here. All right. So there you go. So let's do this again. Let me sync. And that's one of the big benefits of Project Server 2010. Okay. Finish to start without lag times. Oh, okay. So let's do this. Give me 1 second. I believe that's getting equipment and okay, there you go. So let me hit save and let me sync this again. Let me unlink this all and let's do this. Yeah, I did too much tweaking for this example, so let me link this again. There you go. So let me hit save. And hopefully I'm starting on a clean slate here. Let me check one more thing, friends. Okay, so this looks good. I just changed all the links just to make it simple. And there you go. So now it worked, all right? So there you go. Sorry about that, Robert, but this is all good. So now, check that out, friends. So now, I've got all my tasks showing up in SharePoint Server 2010. So the idea now is, my resource can come in and say, look, again, since just to the lack of time, I'm just going to update percent here. My resource can come in and say, that's 20% done, that's 30% done, and certainly I can put in the actuals just like what I've been doing. So if you look at my other screencasts, I show you all that stuff. But quickly, after I update, secure location 20%, permits 30%, so I want to come back and do a syncing again, because I want to take what's in SharePoint and make it available back to my Microsoft project schedule. And check this out. 20%, 30%. Y'all see that? So synchronization is bidirectional. But quickly, the capability is really limited, unlike Project Server. In Project Server, you could do a whole lot of other stuff. In Project Server, you can certainly have centralized resource management. It'll take all the dependencies. Here, it's much better in the prior version of SharePoint, but still, you can only use it for so much. So if it's a simple project, simple schedule, all you want is the dependencies to show in your SharePoint site, and it certainly does show it. So there you go. And you want your resource to update their time, they can certainly do it. They don't need Microsoft Project. The PM can have Microsoft Project on their desktop. So last but not the least, let me show you an example of working with multiple projects, and then we'll call it a day. So let's say I've got two projects that I'm managing, and I have the same set of resources. Okay. So in this scenario, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to project. So I created a brand new project. So I'm going to click under project tab, click sub project, and in this, I already pre-created two project files. So I can insert as many projects as I want. Okay. So notice that. Okay. What I did is I took two separate project files and made it available in this single project file, which is known as a master project. And quickly here, I'm going to go to my resource sheet and put in some resources, docs, Joe, okay? So I'm putting resources in this master project, and now I can go back to my Gantt chart and start assigning resources for the various projects. Now, one of the things that you have to do, which notice that it's not showing up even if I have my resources displayed, notice that it's not showing up. One of the things that you have to do is you have to go to that project file and link to where the resources are defined. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you a quick example here. I'll just type the resource name, because what we could do is we could schedule another webcast. I'll just talk about multiple projects. But what you can do is literally link, because I've gotten a lot of questions about this, you can literally link various projects across. So you have two projects. I can take, okay, project start to that start, X to this A, this finish to that start. So once I do that, look at that. I've got two projects, two separate project plans with dependencies interrelated. So this works really well if you're working with big teams. Let's say you have team 1 doing something, team 2 doing something, but their projects are dependent on each other. You can certainly link across multiple projects. And if you're the main project manager or program manager, you can certainly see and forecast how one can affect the other. Okay. So with that, let me go back to my slide. I'm just going to wrap this up with this last discussion about reporting. Microsoft Project 2010 has a lot of great reporting tools built in. So you can just go to all these existing reports around schedule, people's time, and costs, and you have visual reporting as well. It takes advantage of Excel and Access, so you can have pivot tables and pivot charts. If you're using SharePoint 2010, you can take data in your project task list and create your dashboards, right? I make fun of that, but it's true. If you use the word dashboard at work, it will get you promoted. Well, great. Hopefully this was beneficial. I know we're right on the dot, 3 o'clock. Questions. So there's a couple of questions here. Catherine, I'm going to address these questions now. I'll open the floor. Can you assign multiple people? Absolutely. I did that earlier, and if you watch the video again, you'll see it. Is there a quick way to compare baselines? Absolutely. I already show that. Project Server 2010 feature. Rob, actually, that's a great topic for another webcast. So, wow, I've committed myself to a bunch of new webcasts. I'll have a Project Server webcast, multiple projects webcast, and a cooking webcast. But certainly, there's a lot of great features, and I'll do some more writing around Project Server. Okay. Other questions? If you guys can throw in your feedback, that would be greatly appreciated. So if you could just go to that little link there, I'd appreciate your feedback. But other than that, if you've registered, like Catherine says, she'll send you the link to the video, but I'll also give her a link to all these PowerPoint slides and other resources that I may have.
So we're getting a lot of questions, Dux. Are you going to try to answer those quickly, or should we save them for another webcast?
No, I'll be happy to address any questions. Yeah, go for it. If you have questions, go for it. Type it on the chat room. I'm having a feedback problem, so I might not hear Catherine quite clearly. But certainly, go ahead. I can stay as long as anybody wants.
Rob is asking about your 2010 book.
2010 book that I don't have yet? Right now, I mean, there's a lot of great topics I'd like to write about 2010, but I'll certainly talk offline and see when we can make something. But right now, I don't have any books. I just write a lot of these topics on my blog posts and in these webcasts.
Okay, and do you see the question about the resource calendar?
Yes, so let me see this. Information, okay, resource calendar, and you collaborate via SharePoint 2010? The answer is no. If you want to start doing that, you got to have Project Server. Great question, though. I see another question. You need information how to the most effective set of Project SharePoint site, what folders, etc. So, Linda, that's exactly what I wrote about in my book, SharePoint for Project Management. Though that book is written for SharePoint 2007, the concepts applies to 2010. So I go through, how you create a risk list, project planning, how you use it. So SharePoint for Project Management, I go through all that. Sub-projects, there are 2 of us with largely separate responsibilities. Would it make sense to have a separate sub-projects for each so that we are not stepping on each other's toes, sharing the same? Absolutely, Bill. I mean, the last thing you want to do is work on the same Microsoft project file. If you have separate responsibilities, separate pieces of the project, then have 2 separate project files. But if the tasks are the same, and if one person is responsible for resourcing and the other is for tasking, just make sure whoever's sharing that one file knows what they're doing. Because as you've seen, if you don't, you could do 10,000 different things. Cherie, PDU credit for this presentation. There's no PDU credit, but I'll work with Catherine on that for future webcasts.
And I think that's about it, Dux. I just have to say it was another great webcast, and I'm looking forward to all the other ones that you've promised, especially the cooking one. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Hey, if you're up for it, I can do a setup on my kitchen with all the video and all that. But other than that, hey, thanks everybody. I appreciate you joining us today. And don't be a stranger. Drop me a line, send me a tweet, friend me on Facebook. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And you'll get an email from me with a link to the recording and some other information. So thanks, everyone. And I hope you'll join us again next time.